Welcome back, everybody, to episode 5 of the Flashpoint Podcast, presented by Smarter Sorting. As always, I'm your co-host, Sam. We have Akriti. Say hi, Akriti.
Hi.
And Alex.
Hello.
That's the core three. Alex is back this week after we replaced her with Megan for a week. And now joining us this week is AJ. Say hello to everybody, AJ.
Howdy.
AJ, yet another person here at Smarter Sorting who's been in the regulatory and compliance world forever. He's actually, I think your specific title is Director of Regulations. Is that right?
Sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of the titles at this company seem to be ever shifting to whatever the new organization structure looks like. So here at Flashpoint, AJ, like we sort of talked about before, we got going. We start with the lightning round, try to get to the most important information first. So who are you and what do you do in the retail industry? What is it that you do with us?
So AJ Kenny, yeah, as you said, like I think official title is like Director of Regulations at Smarter Sorting, but whenever I try to describe to people what I'm actually doing, I think the term I often end up drifting towards is something like a regulatory solutions architect of some sort, where it's like I'm trying to bridge business operations with the red tape that comes with all of that, and then oftentimes it ends up sitting in the chemical regulatory space or health and safety space. That's just kind of where I've lived. But at the end of the day, just solving problems that have to deal with regulations, laws, other red tape that businesses and operations have to do. So at least I've coined the term regulatory solutions architect. I don't know if it'll stick, but I like it.
Architect is one of those words, while I feel like it obviously does carry real meaning, so I come from the world of like sales and growth, and that is the absolute king of titles that sound like they're bigger than they are and don't carry a meaning, but carry more of a feeling. And the amount of roles I've had in my past that have had specialist or executive on them when there's nothing about either of those that are true. Okay, well, this question I put in here, and I've been sort of surprised by how interesting the answers have tended to be. I thought my story on how I got to Smarter Sorting was a bit of falling through the cracks and rising up through places I didn't expect to. But how did you end up working in the retail industry and at Smarter Sorting?
Yeah, so yeah, again, like a lot of people take a roundabout way to get there. I was doing environmental safety research as a graduate student, looking at genetically modified crops and their impact to the soil systems in Midwest agricultural soils. And so they're like, "Oh, how did you get into retail?" Well, I think during that whole scientific discovery, I was like, there's a lot of regulatory oversight here. Like they're doing these safety studies because they want to prove something to a government organization, like, hey, this is safe to put into production in real fields. And I was like, oh, it was kind of, I think I was like 20, and it first dawned on me, like, oh, there's like a lot of red tape you have to go through, a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and there's room for scientific people and technical people to be in that to support that. And so I was like, well, I don't know, I kind of read into it, and I was like, I kind of like this intersection of red tape and law and science. Because I definitely wasn't the type of person who was like so gung-ho about like I need to, like, PhD people you talk to who are like, I want to focus this and do this one thing for like the next 30 years of my life. I'm just not wired that way. So anyways, when I ended up leaving school, I really searched for something that was in that nexus of chemical regulations, even though I was more on the plant and environmental sciences side. And it was right around 2012 is when I was graduating, and that's the exact same year that this thing called GHS came into the United States, which is the globally harmonized system for classifying chemicals. And it was kind of this large overhaul of how OSHA classifies hazardous chemicals. And it was kind of a good time because at that time, like so many people needed to update their safety data sheets, product labels, like understand the hazards. And so I kind of got lucky, I suppose, where someone's like, hey, we need someone who can kind of cross this barrier between like regulations and scientific knowledge. And so I ended up getting a kind of an entry level role, writing safety data sheets, consumer product labels, and then it was for a kind of like in the sporting goods industry, a company that had a lot of their own private brand formulations. And so, that's a lot more on the supplier and brand side, but it just so happens that they had a whole retail wing of the company. And so I remember on day one, it was like I went into a giant warehouse and I was pulling out batteries and writing down on a sheet of paper every product's batteries, like how many were there, what was the brand, what was the size. And that was my first jump into retail. And then, fast forward a few years, I ended up working at Amazon, and that was mind altering because that was like
We've
retail to
spent,
the
we've spent a good
retail to
amount
the,
of time, even in the first four episodes of this show, talking about Amazon. So I can,
yeah,
well, we might need to have an entire other episode just talking about your time spent at Amazon, because I would actually be pretty interested to learn what that looked like.
totally, totally. Yeah. And so after a few years being in the industry, I got to a point where I could work at Amazon and had a really neat opportunity there. And so again, spent about 4 years on the retail side of Amazon, learning everything about all the different various operations and fulfillment opportunities there, and then worked at AWS for I think a year, which is I didn't really understand it at the time, but it was like, oh, this is so completely different and it's a lot slower pace. And I kind of like the fast pace of retail.
Hmm.
And anyways, I ended up syncing up with Charlie or sometime around the COVID years, early COVID years, and who, obviously is our CEO and co-founder, and we kind of hit it off. And a few months later, 6 months or a year, I ended up coming to work at Smarter Sorting in 2021. So it's been over 5 years and it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. The most veteran of all of us, right, Alex? 5 years has you beat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been.
And you all have me beat by quite a bit. When we got started on this, you said you were in working with Midwest Soils. What school was that? Was that like a Nebraska, Iowa?
Yeah, Iowa State University.
Oh, okay, nice. Me and Alex were Jayhawks, so Jayhawks and Cyclones coming up
Okay.
against each other. That's very fun.
Oh,
Okay. Well, again, like always, I expect a certain trajectory, and I've now come to expect very different trajectories in how you get into this very weird world of regulation and AI models and all of this pushed together. Okay. So now getting out of just what is your story? What is the AJ Kenny story? You've been in the industry now for a while, and you've been at Smarter Sorting for 5 years. What is the biggest shift or like change in how the industry works that you've noticed in your time, not just at Smarter, but in the industry at whole, right? You've been here through COVID, you've been here through a lot of big world and like geopolitical changes, but I would be interested to see what comes to mind first as the biggest change you've observed.
yeah, and I think it probably started even before I jumped in, but I think it took a dramatic swing was probably the shopping experience of e-commerce.
Hmm.
I think a lot of us grew up with malls, and people might be like, what is that, today? Because I know a number of malls that have just kind of like closed down. So the brick and mortar concept and shopping online is
They just have
probably
become
the
weird
biggest.
ghost towns and shells of themselves where you walk around a mall and you feel like you're in a zombie movie.
Yeah, it can feel weird. Um, but then, on top of that, I'd say even within the last 10 years, just within e-commerce, because that's where I spent so much time, the time to deliver goods was probably the most mind-blowing thing that I've experienced or noted, which was just like, it used to take on average, it's like, someone will deliver it in a couple weeks, and now I can get something to my door in the next 5 hours.
Hmm.
So the time to delivery is another one that's just kind of blown my mind.
Do you think the
No,
time to deliver also has sort of shifted customer expectations of like when things will be delivered.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in the audience would jump in, but I would
Yeah.
totally agree. Actually, when I worked at Amazon, you'd bump into other people at industry events who were maybe also in the retail space, and they
Mhm.
kind of be like, "Well, you're setting a bar that is really challenging to meet here." And it was, kind of seen as like in a humorous way, very annoying, because that was their big thing was like, "We will get it to you faster."
I definitely think it's shifted people's behavior, like e-commerce in general, and the fact that people don't really go to brick and mortars anymore, or do it a lot less. And then just the fact that, I mean, I used to live in Long Beach, California, which is right outside of LA, and now I live in a small town that is outside of Denver, but like really outside of Denver. Like I'm fully in the mountains, and in Long Beach, a distribution center, of course, is right near LA, and things would show up same day.
Mhm.
Even not from Amazon, but just generally, things would show up so quickly. And then here in a small town, it takes a couple of days, and even that, the shift in that is definitely like a shift in my husband's and my mindset a little bit. And then also, I think the ease at which we can get all this stuff just makes the world of commerce move a lot faster, and people like, I think it's represented in like trends and all of the things that go on with social media, and everything just moves faster and then dies faster. um, I don't necessarily know if I have a point to that besides the fact that the sustainability aspect of it is very worrying to me, but
Yeah,
it's
I
interesting
mean,
that people have been conditioned that that feels like normal now. And it would have been completely unheard of even when I was like not even just a kid, but a teenager. And I'm not, it hasn't been that long that this shift has happened so much in society.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Like, there's pros and cons to it, like resources and information being so incredibly like ready and available to people so quickly and immediately is good. But then the cons of it, I think, show up in a lot of other ways, right? Like, obviously, there's impatience in consumers and expectations that just purely come from what they've grown to expect. And then, obviously, the larger impact globally and environmentally. And then, even in myself, I've noticed it and been called out on it where, like, if I'm talking to somebody, if I'm doing like pure growth work, right, and I'm showing somebody something and it doesn't immediately populate, if it isn't something that is immediately deliverable, like within a couple seconds, I feel like I notice people starting to fade, or I feel like I need to apologize when the work that's being done demands time. And most people have that time. And I'm just nervous that everybody is going to be like, oh, well, this is something that takes forever if it isn't quite literally instantaneous, which is ridiculous. But, anyways, all right. Well, thank you, AJ. Two more of our sort of lightning round questions. Uh, is there any belief that you have that you feel that most of your peers disagree with, or just one that you very firmly stand on? What is it that you stand on business on, AJ, is what I'm asking.
Uh, yeah, this is one I probably haven't had a debate with someone on, but I've been kind of waiting for it to drop. And it kind of ties into what we were just talking about, which is
Yeah.
customer returns of products and
Hmm.
the expectations of people and shopping. And I remember again seeing this in the Amazon days, looking at year over year. When January comes, your heart sinks a little bit because that's return season. Like it's its
Hmm.
own season. And it just gradually would grow and grow every year. And then I think it got to a point where, you step back and you're like, uh, is shopping or even intentional anymore? Is it just, uh, I'm going to purchase this, see what I think about it, send it back. It's free shipping, free returns. So like, I, the thing I do, so where I'm getting is I don't even understand the economics of how this is even sustainable. Like, how can you have something shipped to you, test it out for a couple weeks, and like just have that volume go back? And to me, it feels like maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like the customer who's making that choice doesn't have a lot of cost involved. I know there's some
Uh-huh.
retailers who will have like restocking fees and maybe
Yeah.
you have to pay to ship it back, but I think more and more they're trying to eliminate those because again, there's this high bar of like that's not normal anymore. So I don't understand the economics of that is
What a
where I'm going.
what a cool one to bring up. I haven't thought. I mean, like I've obviously like thought about the fact that like with Amazon, you just send it back, and most of the time they just destroy it, or it lives in a warehouse, and then people buy a bin of returns. But the the expectation of also free return, like we were just talking about with deliverables, that's really interesting. Alex, what do you think about that? I saw you sort of also start to smile and nod.
Yeah, I mean, I I definitely have in my own personal life seen the behavior of like I want to try I don't know exactly which shoe I want, so I'm gonna buy a ton, like a ton of pairs from Amazon or like I want to try this in all these colors or different sizes and just buy them and I'll send back whatever I don't like. So
Yeah.
knowingly buying things that only one in large quantities that only one is going to work and then sending them back and like that used to be something that like for instance my mom would do at Kohl's when we were kids and it was like you try all these on at home and then I'll take the rest back that don't work if she didn't want to take us actually out or something like that and that analogous behavior is definitely being transferred over to Amazon where instead of going back to the store. Um, it's just getting shipped back. And I agree, I don't understand the economics of it because, to my understanding, there is a lot of stuff that Amazon basically just bins after that happens. And I'm wondering, like, are their margins really that high for them to be able to take that kind of just build in that kind of hit? And then also, again, I come at everything from a sustainability lens. Like, I don't buy firsthand like it's part of I've been not buying anything firsthand clothing wise for 5-ish years.
Hmm.
That kind of so it icks me out in a personal way that I'm like, that's probably generating so much waste and then the carbon costs of shipping are not nothing and um all that. So that's why I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I don't understand the economics of it, and I also feel concerned about the environmental impact and then the sociological, psychological impact of getting in the habit of doing that, and lots of people doing that. So yeah, I don't really have an answer. I just have an opinion, I guess.
I mean that's a lot of what Flashpoint was created for, was me and Akriti having a weekly meeting where we went over kind of like what was happening in the world and talking growth and marketing and being like, well, hey, let's just record this and talk to other people at Smarter Sorting about it. So perfect. I know that I wish my mom had bought a bunch of stuff at Clothes and brought it home because what my mom did was we would go to Talbot's, and the second we walked into Talbot's, me and my sister would groan because my mom would then spend an hour and a half trying everything on in the store and almost always buying nothing, and then me and my sister groaning all the way home until we went to like TCBY or something, and she shut us up with treats, which still works to this day. All right, last one, unrelated to smarter sorting, unrelated to regulations or AI or technology. What's something right now that AJ is reading, watching, listening to that you are particularly liking or interested in, or particularly hate? No one's done that yet, but if there's something you want to make sure no one sees or reads, this is also your platform to do that.
Um, well, I suppose my work bleeds over into my real life a little bit. Um, Not on purpose though. So I like to listen to the Freakonomics podcast, which
Yeah.
has nothing to do with retail or technology usually. But this recently they had like a two-part episode on AI and space, and I don't know. It's one of those ones where you just can't stop thinking about it.
Mhm.
They're talking about different companies. You know, they're interviewing some Google people about putting orbital data centers in space and how they're gonna rotate around the Earth and they're gonna be solar powered, like have like kind of like appendages like that are going to be absorbing light, and then it's going to transmit the data. And so all the compute, and you think about the headlines of people who are like, no data centers in our backyards. And, because yeah, it's like a lot of energy, a lot of water, and people are, kind of like realizing this. And now it's like, okay, if you were to offshore all that into space, like it was just like a whole mind-blowing thing that I had never really thought about, and super fascinating. So
Which,
that's, I don't know, that was my tangent that I've been listening to while I've been running.
this sort of brings me to the like electric cars versus gas cars. I watched a video, I forget who it was, but it was like what's actually worse for the environment. And the decision was easily electric cars are better for the environment. But with all of the mining that's needed done to create the batteries, there's like a big upfront impact. And I wonder if that would be similar, where it's like getting a data center to space has to be extremely impactful in its like environmental, just like I don't know, like you'd have to have spaceships
Yeah.
burning rocket fuel to get everything up there. You'd have to build them. But once they're there, I guess in theory, but then to maintain them and everything, I don't know. I don't know. That is interesting.
I don't know. I mean, they're pretty bad down here. So,
Yeah, they're pretty,
like,
it's pretty rough
I
here.
don't know if the capital investment up front is all that different, realistically. And then they're at least not putting PFAS in your water. They're just,
Yeah.
you know,
And they're
I'll
also
just,
just not taking up land and just like
yeah.
ruining lands with windowless Death Stars. Bad analogy because Death Stars are obviously in space, but
Has AJ, have you heard of the YouTube channel Kurtzixot? It's so hard to it's
I have
hard.
not.
Okay,
I watched one.
I knew Sam knew it. It makes sense to me that a Creedy knows it. It's like a, I guess science, I guess that they do sometimes like hypothetical scenarios, like what if we tried to colonize Venus, or real explanations of, what is a virus or how do vaccines work, that kind of thing. Generally scientifically minded, and they do these cute little animations that are a really interesting style. But they do a lot of weird space stuff. Like there's one that's I my husband's always like, "Oh yeah, you haven't mentioned this before," because I am constantly like, "There's a thing called the Great Filter," but they talk a lot about space. I would not be surprised if they ended up talking about putting data centers in space, and I would love to hear them do that. But it just reminded me of them, and maybe some of their videos would be of tangential interest to you, separate from, yeah, this. I'll send you my Great Filter one, and you see how you feel and see if it carry on. But
Their most recent one, which I watched yesterday, was "Will we ever make it outside of our
yeah, I
solar
watched that
system?
too.
No, of our galaxy."
No,
And
it's solar system.
it was solar system. Okay, will we ever make it outside of our solar system? And it was like, well, we're gonna have to create a vehicle that can travel at 20% of light speed, and it'll take us forever to do it. So most likely, no, we will never do that. But again, totally unrelated to anything we're talking about. It's just my favorite fact from that video. And now you brought up space, and I want to ramble about it. One of the problems they talked about was even though space is almost completely empty, it's not. There's little bits of dust, there's little rocks, and if you were traveling at 20% of light speed and you hit a thing the size of a golf ball, like a piece of gravel the size of the golf ball, when it hit the front of whatever spacecraft you were in, it would generate as much energy as two atomic bombs going off because that speed hitting literally anything is catastrophic. But anyways, we will move into, as our upfront section has already taken 24 minutes. We'll move through the news of the week fairly quickly. AJ, thanks for letting us get to know you. Now we're just going to kind of go through a few news stories in the tech and AI world and a little bit of sustainability. Typically, it's just over the last week, but obviously, for all of the people out there who are anxiously awaiting episodes of Flashpoint, we missed last week because our guest unfortunately canceled. But we're going to go ahead and dive into it. So, the first one is talking about Kroger. So, Grocery Dive came out with an article interviewing a few people at Kroger that essentially is saying that they are closing down their automated warehouses. They're moving their AI focus from robotics fully into a bet on agentic shopping. We've talked about Kroger's agentic shopper in the past, and kind of their hopes for it. I believe it's a Gemini powered shopping assistant that is going to be fully conversational, generative AI that builds baskets based on conversations. And they, like we have in the past, think that this is more of where actual savings and growth is going to come from. It makes me a little bit more nervous than robotics. I mean, obviously, shifting away from robotics saves some jobs, but as a consumer, my initial thoughts are they going to just be trying to make you spend more money by saying, hey, I want to make a lemon pound cake, and then recommending all of the most expensive things to make a lemon pound cake? So their Kroger, being they, says that the shift moving off of robotics, moving off of warehouse robots and AI in that way, which also doesn't really feel like AI to me, but it's what they're saying, is going to save them roughly $400 million a year. So yeah, opening that up to the table. Me and Akriti have spent some time talking about people wanting to lean into robots and then not very early on in this podcast, but I'll open it up to the table. Any thoughts on Kroger dropping the bots and moving to chatbots instead, or moving fully into it instead?
I guess I could jump in. Like,
Feel free.
I can understand like hardware just being really expensive because you have to acquire it and maintain it, and it's not cheap. So maybe, I mean, maybe this is maybe reading between the lines, but I'm like, maybe it has nothing to do with AI, and it's just like this is really expensive and not worth it. Maybe, I don't know.
A lot of what we've spent time talking about is the AI investment that companies and retailers and grocers are making and where that's going and what's going to actually be worth it. What's going to actually make people be like, look, I did a good job. I'm using AI. Alex, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna say an anecdote. I think one of our backup store hardware backup store service hardware things, we call them Boss, got hit by a forklift this past like couple days. So it's just like an example of how things can be expensive in a warehouse or the backside of a store. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we've talked multiple times on this podcast about people, the downside to it, which is like losing jobs. And I do think that pretty quickly, as people lean into AI, it'll be found out where you can't replace the human element, right? And where that actually is just more efficient, and leaning into anything else is just going to end up costing you more money and making you less efficient. But Creedy, any thoughts on that one, or should I move on to the next one?
I think it's interesting because to me it seems like robotics kind of in the back of the store is pretty different from an agent that helps you like plan meals.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before, where like a lot of these retailers are focusing on that type of consumer agent that helps consumers build baskets or try on clothes or whatever it may be. It's interesting because kind of like what AJ said, they're claiming they're saving 400 million a year, but I don't know if that necessarily means that they're going to grow their revenue a huge amount by having a tool that helps you uh, plan your meals, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and also, I am still yet to be fully convinced that the chatbot in retail is the answer. I am yet to know anybody that is actively using AI chatbots at the like checkout level. So who knows? I think we're all above 25 here. Maybe people who are in the generation below us are really leaning into that, but I have yet to see it. So I'm going to be interested to track it. All right, moving on. FMI did their annual industry analysis, which FMI used to be Food Marketing something, and they've changed their name to Food Industry Analysis. I forget exactly the change, but FMI doesn't mean anything anymore. They have a completely other name, and the letter M is nowhere in it. Um, this goes along with a lot of what we've talked about. They are now saying that 68% of all food realtors are using AI, which is a jump up from 47%, and that 59% are now using generative AI, which is up from 53%, with roughly double the retail tech spend occurring in the first half of 2026, going up to 2% of total budget, of total sales, sorry. And 71% expect to spend more on technology in 2026, which, as I do the research for these podcasts, I just continue to see these fun percentages popping up that seem meaningful in the fact that line go up, but less and less meaningful in what is actually happening. Obviously, people are saying we are making investments in AI. We are spending more money in AI, more systems on AI. And it's rare, which is why we end up talking about Amazon and Walmart so much, that we actually get concrete numbers on what this is getting them and what they're doing with it. So yet again, the grocery world is shifting from being AI curious to now being more AI by default. But what is actually changing? What tipped it so that everybody's going that way, and what are people actually doing with it? AJ, any thoughts on that?
I think my reaction is that one thing the AI companies have done really well is they've made it very easy to adopt their technology, and they've made it real. Like you can just go hit these APIs. You can talk to them. Like there's no huge blocker to getting this access, and you can immediately test it out and see how like, oh, okay, how could I actually use this? It's not like I'm thinking of the battery industry because I'm some of a battery nerd, but they've been talking about like solid state batteries are gonna replace, certain battery chemistries, and like there's something like some technology just gets dangled out there forever, and it just is always teasing. But this one is like it's in your face. You can go use it right now, and they've made it super easy to adopt. And so I think that's my opinion as to why it's taken off is it's really easy to incorporate.
Yeah, I fully agree.
I kind of look at this in a similar way as to like beat a dead horse, but there are trade-offs, massive trade-offs to AI in terms of we mentioned using a lot of water, having a high cost, taking up a lot of land, polluting land, etc. So to me, I gave a presentation at HCPA Green Chemistry Conference a long time ago, and I talked about how the more specifically hazardous chemicals and using AI to identify and perhaps predict future hazardous chemicals or future regulation, restriction effects, etc. I think this kind of ties into that where if you're going to be AI maxing and putting all this money in, separate from the money, there is an investment of environmental cost. And like I hope that we can move them to space and offset that. But in the meantime, if all these mega corporations are going to be, yeah, increasing their usage, bragging about increasing their usage, I just hope that it comes with maybe a huge decrease in like food waste. Like maybe these groceries are generating a huge amount of food waste because the supply chains aren't optimized. Honestly, sell by dates and use by dates are so arbitrary. And realistically, most of them are shorter than they really need to be in terms of actual food safety. So I'm hoping that an increased usage will be an increased usage that is targeted in a way that isn't just about saying or bragging or whatever that we are an AI company, and more like, yeah, let's improve that, improve the supply chain, improve even the agricultural conditions, improve the impact of the agriculture, improve people's ability to keep and access fresh food for longer, etc. So that, I'm sure that I know there are companies working on this. I'm imagining that probably a lot of them are working with AI as well, and that might be some part of the investment. But basically, I'm trying to say in a roundabout way, I hope that the investment and the benefit, that the ROI is enough to make it positively impactful and not just like give me your grocery list and let me, like chatbot thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly just having a little shiny toy that they get to
Yeah.
say, look at how we're investing in AI. Okay, last one of this section. Uh, this is less of news and more of just like an article that I read, and we haven't talked specifically about this. It was a Retail Dive article which didn't list an author, which I found weird. Most of them typically do, or maybe I just missed it. But essentially, what the person who wrote it was talking about was how AI commerce has a risky bet associated with it, which is handing off the customer relationship to these AI agents, which isn't something I had really spent a lot of time thinking about. But Etsy, Target, Walmart, one other? Am I forgetting one? No, those are the three examples that it listed. Recently have pushed their catalogs onto and into Gemini and Microsoft Copilot. And with that, they've seen a huge spike in retail being driven to US retailer sites. It was a 393% year over year in Q1 increase in traffic to retail sites. With also, and this is a number we've seen slight variations on, sometimes around 39, sometimes 41, but typically right around that 40, they're saying approximately 42% better conversion rate of people actually checking out from those people that are brought to the sites via AI. But the question that they pose is, with leaning on these agents to drive your traffic, are these retailers, and by extension, the brands and suppliers they're working with, losing customer access and control when it comes to, like, one, ownership of the actual data, but two, no longer really being in control of that relationship and its origin? Akriti, this is one I specifically wanted to sort of hear your opinion on, is the spike of traffic and the spike of conversion, not spike of conversion, but higher conversion rate from that traffic, worth giving up that relationship? I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. And if anybody else has any thoughts that come to mind, I'd love to hear that as well.
I think it reminds me of what we talked about. This was many sessions ago, but it was kind of the concept of Amazon advertising on ChatGPT, but not letting OpenAI scrape their site.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a really interesting relationship where I'm not sure necessarily, I'm sure different retailers or different companies will have different wants and different points that they want to control. And I also think that this specifically ties more into, I believe it's called GEO, which is like SEO, but for, generative AI. And so for me, the way that I see this, it's kind of this concept of marketing and showing up. And so it's almost, there are some, like retailers and companies that do kind of put that on someone else and have that responsibility on someone else right now in terms of like maybe marketing firms or advertising agencies. So I think in relation to that, I'm not sure like how different it would be. Um, but I also think we've talked a lot about how important data is and ownership of data. And so I think that also is a tricky situation, and it'll be interesting to see how this develops over time.
All right. Well, that's sort of the news of the week and a half, 2 weeks since we were here. AJ, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of this Wednesday, which is weird because typically we film and record on Mondays. But thank you. Thanks for telling your story and for bringing up everything that we were able to talk about for the first half and giving us some of your insight as a director of regulatory or director of regulations or whatever your title is for right now. But yeah, Akriti, Alex, obviously, thank you guys. And for everybody listening, thank you for joining us on Flashpoint. We'll see you next week. Bye.